Yeah, what's up, man? Sean G, welcome to the channel, Podcast with Soul. Make sure you go follow me on the Podcast with Soul on Instagram, the Podcast with Soul on Spotify. I really need y'all to go follow me on Spotify so I can get my numbers up. Um, Welcome to the channel. I've been going over to Manhattan every day to check out the Diddy trial in person. I've been in the overflow courtroom up on the 24th floor, and I have been hearing the case in real time. Now, today I want to talk about Scott Cudi, otherwise we all know him as Kid Cudi. He got on the stand, and under direct examination, he was direct examined by the U.S. Attorney Johnson. And he went through that he was an actor and producer. And she asked him, when they started dating. And he said that we were friends and dated briefly in 2011. Okay. Now, what the understanding was, what they have been putting forward since the beginning is that Kid Cudi and Cassie only dated like a month. The month of December 2011, he flew from California to Connecticut to spend Christmas with Cassie. Puff found out, and then supposedly the relationship was dead after 1 month. But after further cross-examination by Puffy's defense attorneys, we found out that him and Cassie had been texting and seeing each other and talking to each other for over a year. Now, this was interesting. When she met Kid Cudi in 2010, Puffy introduced Kid Cudi to Cassie and asked Kid Cudi to do him a favor and to make some beats for Cassie to help her with her music. He agreed, but that ended up Cassie and Kid Cudi started working out together. They started going hiking, talking on the phone, and eventually started to date. Cassie used to confide in Kid Cudi. They both used to confide in each other. That Cass used to tell him that her and Puff were having problems, and that he had. I think he had said that on the stand. I think it came out that Cassie had told Kid Cudi that Puffy had punched and pushed and kicked Cassie one time or another, and Kid Cudi wanted to fight Puff. So the way it started is, under direct examination by the United States government, Kid Cudi testifies that Capricorn, who is an assistant of Puff, called Kid Cudi on the phone from outside Kid Cudi's house and told Kid Cudi that Puffy and someone else broke into his house, Kid Cudi's house. She was in the car outside waiting. She said that Puff forced her to get into the car to go with Puff and this other dude to go break in Kid Cudi's house. And the testimony was that Cassie had gave Puff Kid Cudi's address. Kid Cudi said he went to pick up Cassie. She was stressed out. She seemed scared. And he took her and got her a room at the Sunset Marquis Hotel in Los Angeles. After, when Kid Cudi found out that Puffy was in his crib, he had Puffy's phone number in his phone, and he said he called Puff and told him, asked him, "Motherfucker, you in my house?" And Puffy told him, "Yeah, I want to talk to you." Kid Cudi said he told Puff, I'm on my way. And Puffy told him, I'm going to wait for you here. Kid Cudi said that when he got to his crib, the security camera over his door was moved, and that his dog, who usually is allowed to run free, was locked up in the bathroom. Kid Cudi said that after he checked everything out, he got back in his car and he called Puff because he wanted to confront Puffy. He wanted to fight Puffy. But then he said he had a moment of clarity and thought about it and said, I don't know what this dude is up to. I don't know if he's got a pistol on him or who he's got with him. If they got pistols on him, let me just chill and call the police. And that's what he did. And he made a police report. He said he saw Cassie later that day after the incident where Puffy allegedly breaks into his house. Then they talked about him spending Christmas with Cassie in Connecticut, and he stayed at Cassie's mother and father's house when he went to spend Christmas with her in December of 2011. He said that a month later, January 2012, the relationship with Cassie was over. Now, somebody throws a Molotov cocktail into Kid Cudi's house while he's not at home. He said he was at his, what did he say he was? He was at his ex-girlfriend's sister's house, meeting with his ex-girlfriend. His Porsche 911 Cabriolet was at his crib. Somebody cut open the sunroof and threw a Molotov cocktail into the car, destroying the car. His dog sitter called him on the phone and said, yo, your car is on fire. She was all bent out of shape. He came home and saw the Molotov cocktail in his car, and he was like, what the fuck? He calls the police again. By this time, he is certain in his mind that this is Puffy doing this, that Puffy is behind his car getting blown up, and he thinks that it was intentional. Sometime soon after, was it the next day? The next day after the car fire, he meets up with Puff at the Soho House in Hollywood. Puffy's security, D Rock, and I guess somebody named Dennis set up the meeting. I guess Dennis is a friend of Kid Cudi, and they set up the meeting at the Soho House in Los Angeles. Kid Cudi says he goes, he shows up. Puffy is already in the room. D Nice escorts him into the room and closes the door. And it's just Puffy and Kid Cudi in the room. And that Puffy has his back to Kid Cudi and is looking out the window with his hands behind his back. And Kid Cudi says he looks like a Marvel villain, a Marvel character villain. What the meeting was all about, according to Kid Cudi, is that Puffy wanted to meet with him to find out what the story was with Cassie. How deep was their relationship? What went on, what they had been doing. Because, like I say, Puffy had introduced them to do some music, but things went a little further. At this meeting, he said Cassie showed up at the meeting and that he was mad because Cassie got back with Puff. It came out that he really liked Cassie. Cudi was in love with Cassie. But Cassie was just, to Cassie, Cudi was just something to do whenever she was having static with Puff. He said after the meeting, him and Puffy got together, they shook hands, and he asked Puff, said he was looking him dead in his eye like this. He said, "What are we gonna do about my car?" He said that Puffy looked back at him and says, "I don't know what you're talking about." And that was the end of that meeting. He did say that a few years later, after this incident, he met Puffy again. I don't know if it was a setup meeting, but he saw Puffy again at the Soho House, and that Puffy went up to him and told him, "Yo, I want to apologize about all that bullshit." Oh man, I'm trying to get a cold, so I took some NyQuil. Cold and cough, so it's got me a little drowsy. Now, under cross-examination, Kid Cudi is getting cross-examined by Brian Steele. And he says to Kid Cudi, "Do you have any surveillance photos? Do you have any surveillance photos or video of Puffy being at your house?" Kid Cudi says no. He says the fire department came, the police department came, you gave a report, and they did a DNA collect. They collected DNA off of your Porsche. Brian Steele asked Kid Cudi, "You do know that the DNA came back to a female, right?" The government objected. The judge overruled. No, the judge sustained it. But then Brian Steele asked the question in a different way, but pretty much the same question. Evidence in the fact that the DNA collected off of Kid Cudi's Porsche 911 was not to Puffy. It was to a female. Brian Steele asked Kid Cudi, he says, "You are aware that you have no evidence that there is no eyewitness putting Puffy at your house, and you have no, security video of Puffy being at your house." Brian Steele, Puffy's lawyer, he says, "Are you familiar with a burner phone? An untraceable phone?" And this is the kind of phone Cassie had while she was dealing with Kid Cudi. And Brian Steele asked him, he said, by January 2011, January 2012, your relationship for Cassie had ended, right? He said, yeah. He said, you loved Cassie, right? Yeah. He says, you thought you and Cassie were dating. He said, yeah. He said, you talked to Cassie every day for over a year. He said, yeah. He says, you understand now that Cassie played you. That you were in love with Cassie and Cassie played you. And Kid Cudi was just like kind of quiet on the stand. He asked, he brought up Kid Cudi. He says, you did an international tour called the Cud Life Tour, where you did 65 dates where you were the headliner of the tour. Kid Cudi agreed. He said, Kid Cudi, this is Brian Steele, Puffy's lawyer, you described Kid Cudi as an icon, right, in the music industry. He said, yes. He says, after Puffy introduced you to Cassie and you started working on the music, you began to date her, you began to hang out, y'all used to go to the movies, you began talking to her for over a year. And he said that you guys did drugs together. And Kid Cudi said, drugs? Kid Cudi said, you mean weed? Smoke weed? He said, yeah, that's drugs. He said, yeah, we smoke weed together. And then Brian Steele says, and you had consensual sex with Cassie, didn't you? The government prosecutors jumped up and said, sidebar, sidebar, sidebar. They did not want the jury to hear that part of Brian Steele's cross-examination of Kid Cudi, that Kid Cudi and Cassie, who had been talking and dating for over a year, had consensual sex, because that brings into question the whole narrative under the RICO of forced and coerced, getting together with a man and a woman. So they come back from the sidebar, but Brian Steele don't care nothing about it. He rephrases the question and asks it another way, but essentially it's the same question about you and Cassie, you knew each other for over a year. You guys had sex together, consensual sex. Sidebar, prosecutor, sidebar, sidebar. They shut everything down. They go back up and meet with the judge. They come back. Brian Steele changes his questions. He says, Kid Cudi, you really liked Cassie, didn't you? He said, yes. And Cassie told you, Mr. Cudi, that she wasn't really with Puff, right? Yeah. And Kid Cudi, Cassie told you in Thanksgiving 2010 that her and Puffy were having problems and that they were on again, off again. Kid Cudi agreed. Brian Steele, when you met with federal prosecutors, Kid Cudi, Cassie and Puffy, he asked Kid Cudi about when he met with federal prosecutors, did they discuss Cassie telling him that her and Puff were on again, off again for over 4 years? He initially denied it. He says, well, let me see if I can show you something to refresh your recollection. And he showed him the document of when Cudi met with federal prosecutors where Kid Cudi testified that Cassie told him that her and Puff were on again, off again for 4 years. Brian Steele, he said, Kid Cudi, you and Cassie confided in each other, right? You confided in her, she confided in you. You were in love with Cassie. You really liked Cassie. He said, yes. He says, you spent 3 days with Cassie in Christmas of 2011. You flew across the country to spend Christmas with Cassie, and you stayed at Cassie's house with her mother and her father. He said, yes. He said, you were hurt when Cassie left you and went back to Puff. Kid Cudi said, yes. He said, while you were in Connecticut at Cassie's house, you and Puffy was texting you. Kid Cudi said yes. And he kept saying that he wanted to confront Puff. He really wanted to fight Puff, right? Then Brian Steele comes back and says, Kid Cudi, isn't it true that when you met with prosecutors, you told them that you maybe have left your front door open at your house on the day of the break-in, that there really was no forced entry, there really was no break-in, you left your door open? He said, yes. He said, you called Puff the day your house was broken into, and he said he was coming over and you were gonna fight Puff, weren't you? He said, yes. He said, Kid Cudi, isn't it true that when you met with federal prosecutors, because Cassie confided in you, you were with her for a year, that she never told you that there was physical abuse by Puffy against her? That's true. Isn't it true that Cassie told you, and you told federal prosecutors when you met with them, that Cassie never told you that there was any sexual abuse done to her by Puff? He agreed. He said, I was in love with Cassie. Then Brian Steele said, isn't it true that both you and Puffy were confused with your relationship with Cassie, that Puffy was being played too, because Cassie had been talking to you for over a year and he didn't know, and you had thought she left Puff and you were talking to her for over a year, but she was really playing both of y'all? Isn't it true that you got played? And everybody in the courtroom was like, he said, isn't it true that Cassie was living two different lives? One that she showed you and another one that she showed Puff? And Kid Cudi is agreeing to all of this on the stage. He said, Kid Cudi, isn't it true that nobody was charged for the damage to your car? Sidebar, government jump up, sidebar. They come back from the sidebar and Brian Steele rephrases the question, Puffy's lawyer. He says, Kid Cudi, no other action was taken in regards to the damage of your car, right? He says, no. He says, you met with federal prosecutors and you told the feds that Cassie had multiple telephones, an untraceable phone, and that Cassie told you Puff's address. Isn't it true that Cassie told you that Cassie gave Puffy your home address? And that was the end of the testimony. But what was key is that there is no video footage of Puffy at Kid Cudi's house. There are no fingerprints or no DNA placing Puffy at Kid Cudi's house. There are no photos that place Puffy at Kid Cudi's house. There are no eyewitnesses that place Puffy at Kid Cudi's house. And Kid Cudi agrees and testifies to this on the stand under oath, and that the DNA that was collected on his car came back to a female. Now, one can only guess or hypothesize why no other action was taken, because they have the DNA of the female, right? Who put the Molotov cocktail in his car, right? And he has to know who it is because they got the DNA. Well, unless they don't have Cassie's DNA, I'm assuming, allegedly. And then if you don't pursue, if he would have found out that it was Cassie, of course he wouldn't bring any action against her because he was in love with her. I know some of y'all have been in the comment section saying that it's Cassie who is the one that put the Molotov cocktail in his car. So, I just wanted to go over this relationship that Kid Cudi and Cassie had. It was not for 1 month. It was for over a year. And Cassie was playing both Puffy and Kid Cudi. And Kid Cudi really, really liked Cassie. He was in love with Cassie. And Brian Steele brought that out in the courtroom and made Kid Cudi testify to and agree on the stand under oath that he was in love with Cassie, and he was upset when she went back to Puff. He wanted to fight Puff. He wanted to confront Puff. And Puffy was just as much in the dark about him. So Cassie was playing both of them, and that came out in the case. Let me think of anything else with Kid Cudi. That was about it. Make sure you follow me on Instagram. The podcast was sold. Make sure you follow me on Spotify. The podcast was sold. Peace.